What's going on, everybody? Feder here from 3D Print SOS. Welcome back to the channel. And in today's video, we're going to be fixing the Qidi Tech Plus 4. And if you guys click this video, you probably already know what's going on, but I'll give you a really brief description of what's happening. I've had this machine for about 2 months now. I had no idea that there was a problem going on behind the scenes with the SSR boards that are giving mains power to the heaters of this machine. In the 2 months that I've had this thing, I've used it almost exclusively for ABS and ASA after my initial testing and initial projects that I did with this during my review, and I had no idea this was going on. I did see a bunch of posts happening, whether it's Reddit or Facebook groups, of people having problems with their SSRs, showing photos of them being slightly burnt or even becoming melted, things along those lines. And I've been posting on my community tab on YouTube the responses that Qidi Tech has been giving other people and myself, obviously, directly speaking with them about this problem. And then Grant from 3D Musketeers did a live stream, which I was there, I was watching him testing his particular SSR board with tools, and I mean, he blatantly proved that there was some kind of issue. So I obviously got my board in, I waited a little bit, and I did a live stream to test mine. I wanted to check mine out to see if I was also having this problem, since I'm in the 110, 120 volt region, which is where this problem is happening with these boards. And if you guys joined that live stream, you guys might know that I definitely had a problem. So here is my board right over here, and I gotta say, this is probably one of the worst cases that I have personally seen. Everything is melting. We have complete failure right here of the actual SSR. The coils are completely black and burnt. I never smelt it, I had no idea, and this is just extremely dangerous. And Qidi Tech has since then, like I mentioned, not only made a statement about them finding out about this issue, but they claim that they will send you an SSR board, which I installed. They will also extend your warranty by a year, and the new board fixes the issue. So I did another live stream where we installed it and we tested it after some time heating the chamber to make sure it was all good, and it was. But at the end of the day, my stance on this is, yes, you should not have to fix their machine, especially on an $800 machine. You shouldn't be. They should test it, they should figure it out. If there's a recall, they should recall it. I totally agree that this is a problem. However, even with this installed into my machine, I just don't trust a $5 part on my $800 machine. And me personally, I'd much rather use something a lot more reputable. For example, this Omron SSR. There's also Panasonic and another brand. I'll have links to everything that you need down below if you guys do agree with my opinion. So for me, I'd rather pay the $35 or so to buy these parts, to upgrade this thing so that I never have to worry about this problem again, so this thing can work either at home or in my office for years to come with this heater, because the actual machine itself prints amazing. I really enjoy this thing. I enjoy a lot about it. There's very little gripes I have outside of the wiring and whatever this problem is. So me, I'd like to take matters into my own hands. It's entirely on me. I'm not an electrician. I'm not a professional. But if you guys are of the same mindset that you'd rather put in a reputable part, hopefully this video helps you out. So that's what we're going to be doing today. We're going to be installing that. So let's go over a few things that you need. First, let's go over the printables that you're going to need for this. And we have an awesome file here by Nox Spectre. Thank you very much for sending me these files on our Discord there. But this, I really like this because it's like an over-engineered version of this. But what you see down here is a base. I printed mine in ASA, carbon fiber, just so it can take a little bit of heat, although it won't be taking that much. The point of this bottom piece is to align with where the stock SSR board sits. So it uses the same exact mounts, and it squishes this heatsink that we have right over here. There's lots of variations of different heat sinks, by the way. This one's the cheapest, so, and it's going to function perfectly fine. That gets clamped down onto that mount. Then we have a PETG printed fan mount that slides into the heatsink, into the slots, just like that. It clicks on, and now we're able to mount a fan onto this, which will run at the same time the heater runs. So we have an awesome heatsink, a reputable SSR, and then finally what you're going to need after that is this diagram right over here. This is the brains of the entire thing. There's an entire wiki dedicated to this, by the way, which I will link down below. And what this is going to do is it's just going to help us wire this thing really easily. One thing that you have to notice here is the thermal fuse. This is another layer of protection. Now mine over here, I have these for my Voron projects. I have a 125C version. I would highly suggest you guys get 100 or even 95, because if this thing is getting that hot, then it should pop and cut the power off. And that's exactly what this does. The thermal fuse will pop once it gets to its rated temperature. So you want this thing sitting on the heatsink as close to the SSR as possible, and I'll show you how we're going to do that on this. I just have a ferrule mounted on one of the ends so we can put this on the SSR. This side is going to go into one of our little connectors here, where they called compact lever connectors. These are really inexpensive versions of Wagos, essentially, which is what's pictured in that diagram. But essentially, you pick up this lever, you put in your wire, you clamp down, and bam, this thing's in here. You can put another wire on this end, and now it is safe and a nice way to connect everything. So that's what we're going to be doing with this. Now, there's a couple more things that you need. One is a 24-volt fan. Here, let's go to this camera view. 24-volt fan. GDS Time makes some really good fans that are inexpensive, that work well. Go for the dual ball bearing versions. They work a lot longer. And to go along with this, I made this little wire. You don't have to do this. There's other ways you can connect this. There's even an empty slot on the board that you can use. If you're good with Klipper, you can find that pin out. But essentially, all I made was a little wire that has a male JST plug and 2 females. This is just going to split a 24-volt signal. So one of these fans is going to be this one that's going to turn on with the heatsink, and the other one is going to be that actual blower fan on the heater unit. So whenever that thing runs to give us heat, this thing runs to cool our heatsink. Okay, so just a Y connector, just something real simple that you can wire yourself. I also made this to make the video a little bit easier. As you see later, you don't necessarily have to use this. You can use the stock one. All you need is some ferrules on the end. But all this is a JST plug with a black and red wire, so that we know which one's negative, which one's positive. And this is going to go to the SSR. The board is going to give the signal to the SSR to turn on. The SSR is going to give mains power to the heater, and we should be cooking. All right, so that is it. And just some miscellaneous hardware. I'll talk about it as we go. Some of the hardware is also laid out in the printables file right over here. I believe M3 by 13 is what they suggest for the fans and to mount the actual heatsink onto this mount. All right, so let's get started right away. I'll try to keep the video with minimal edits, but at the same time, I don't want to waste your time. So we're going to be jumping around just a bit. First thing I want to do is remove the cover. Also want to note that I did take off the poop chute. The poop chute sits right over here. I just removed it so that we have a little bit more room, and it's better for you guys to see what I'm doing in the video. We'll be putting that on a little bit later. But let's go ahead and take off the cover. Now let's get the show on the road. All right, and here you can see the upgraded SSR board. Here is the original. You can see that it is definitely a different board. In fact, these wires go into a different, in a different order. Make sure your machine is unpowered. It's not off, completely unplugged. That's the safest way to do this. But we're gonna unplug a couple things. First, I'm gonna undo the signal wire. I'm gonna plug in mine, making sure that you consider the negative and positive wires here. The plus wire should be at the top of the JST plug, and the negative should be at the bottom. There you go. So that's going to be our wire there. The next one that I want to disconnect from here is the fan, the blower fan. It's this top JST plug right over here. And what I want to do is I'm going to plug in one of our ends here, and we'll plug that back in so that this part of the install is done and ready, and we don't have to think about it later. We can just plug in our fan and go. There we go. We'll get that kind of out of the way, and let us get that board, or these wires undone rather, so that we can remove this board. And these things do have to come all the way off, because these are looped and they don't just slide off. All right, we'll get these 3 wires out of the way. We're actually going to be cutting this black wire to connect it to the blue wire that's coming out up here. So just keep that in mind. You're going to need some space for that. You can pull them out just a little bit more. There's some more room in there. But let's go ahead and take the board out and get that out of the way. All right, and there it is out. As you can see, after some use, there's zero degradation there. So this one is working fine, at least so far in my very limited use of it. But like I said, there's just something about this thing where I'm not 100% trusting it after what I've seen with mine, especially because this thing is in my home and going to be in my office. I'd much rather use something like this. All right, so let's set that aside. And I will be using the standard hardware to put this back in. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's install our adapter here. Make sure you definitely don't over tighten those three because they're just self-tapping screws in the plastic, and there isn't too much bite. Very easy to strip those things. So there we go, our adapter is in, and now let's put together the rest of it before we mount it. I think the first thing, just to have, because we have a room here, is to splice our blue wire with our ground wire here based on the diagram I showed you earlier. Let me go ahead and show you again just real quick. So right over here we have this neutral spliced together with this neutral, and that's what we're going to be doing. There's a Wago here, and like I said, we will be using our little line-in lever clips. So let's go ahead and install that now. So I will use some wire cutters, snip, snip, there we go. So like I said before, to install these, you just lift the levers. Doesn't matter which brand of these you got. We're gonna put one end in, make sure it goes all the way. Clip that down, make sure it ain't going nowhere. You should be able to see it from the bottom. That looks like it's a good connection. We're gonna take this side, put that in as well, clamp down. Perfect. And now we have the negatives together. We could tuck them out of the way. We'll do some wire management just a little bit later once everything is installed and in place. All right, that should be good. We do have another one of these to install for the Wago connector, so let's prep that as well. And that's going to be our main positive here, our live for mains power. So let's pull that out of the way just like this. And we're going to be cutting this all in the same way. We're just going to snip that connector. There we go. Strip the wire, give it a good little twist, just like that. And we should be able to put this right on there and connect it to our thermal fuse. All right, there we go. So that is connected to the thermal fuse, and we should be good to go there. All right, let's set that down and get the rest installed. Now we're going to take our heatsink here and attach the SSR onto it. The SSR does have a top and a bottom. You can see how the text is going up where you're going to mount yours. I'm going to mount it going upward just so I can read everything. It'll make it a lot easier. Obviously use that diagram. So we're going to take our M4 hardware, and I'm going to do the bottom one first. So we'll drop that in and just screw it down so that it's all held together. All right, now that you have your lower bolt of the SSR and the heatsink attached, make sure that this part is lined up. This is probably the most tricky part of the entire thing, really, is to get this thermal fuse installed at the same time as the wiring. And what I like to do is I have my M4 nut. I'm just going to put it on top of the thermal fuse just like this. We are going to sandwich it in underneath the fin. Don't worry about the alignment too much. We'll align it when we clamp it. But you want to align that so when we go ahead and tighten the SSR down, it is actually going to go into the threads here, and this is going to be nice and flat. The thermal fuse is going to be nice and flat up against the heatsink, and it's going to get a much better reading. I'm finding that this is one of the cleanest ways to do it for this particular install. So what you want to do is you want to get your yellow wire. Make sure you go back to this diagram right over here. That yellow wire is ground, and that's what we're going to be installing now. So let's go ahead and put that in the center. Just like that. We're going to drop in our longer hardware into there and start tightening down. And as it's all going in, you want to just make sure that everything is aligned and that you are threading into this nut that's going to be clamping essentially the thermal fuse in. So there we go. This is what we should be looking like. We got the yellow wire grounded to the heatsink. The heatsink is also holding the thermal fuse up against the block, and that's going to give the thermal fuse a better reading. You can also put some thermal paste if you really like. And then what that leaves us is to put the thermal fuse onto the number 2 of the SSR. Once again, going back to this diagram, as you can see there, we got 2, which is wire number 1, which is our main live wire. So let's go ahead and put that in. I like to put them on the inside, push it in there as much as we can. Let's go ahead and make sure that when we clamp it, it is nice and tight. Nothing is going to be loose. There we go. So that is good to go. Next is number 1. This has to be going to the actual heater, and that is one of these wires that's coming out up here. Our blue one was the one we attached to, blue one was number 2, attached to number 5, and now we're going to be doing number 4, the heater wire, to number 1 on the SSR. And I have to take out that bolt all the way, which is going to be a little bit tricky to put back in, of course, but that's because they have these completely looped wires on their end here, but that's okay. It's actually good. That means they're not going to be slipping out. So a little bit of gymnastics to get that bolt in. So let me go ahead and speed through there, and I'll show you what it looks like all attached. All right, there we go. So now we have the wire going to the actual heater in number 1. We have the ground going to the ground and also holding our thermal fuse. The thermal fuse is plugged into number 2 here and is connected to wire number 1, which is our live wire. So now it is going to be much easier to attach this thing onto our adapter. So let me go ahead and do that. And the way we're going to do it is there's these little brackets from the original file going back to right over here to our original. As you can see right over here, they basically squish this down and use this M3 hardware. So let me go ahead and do that. I'm actually only going to put on 1 so that we have just enough space to slide the fan in. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so I just have this loosely in place, and that's because now we want to install our fan first onto our PETG bracket here. And the way that I'm going to do it is we got to make sure that the fan is going outward this way. Just going to install it just like this. We only need 2 pieces of hardware for this. You can obviously do 4, 3, whatever you'd like, whatever you feel comfortable with. 2 should be plenty to hold on one of these fans. So let's go ahead and screw that in. All right, so here's what we got. We got the fan attached to our bracket. So now what we want to do is plug it in just so that we don't forget it later. Make sure the polarity is correct. It is. Make sure the polarity is correct there too. It is. And we are going to go ahead and just slide that in place right underneath the heatsink. There we go. And it should just click just like that. Perfect. Okay, now I'm going to attach the bracket onto the bottom and tighten this whole thing down so that it's nice and secure. I pre-started it right into one of these little adapters. Let's go. Okay, and there we go. We have this secured. It's secured to the stock location. The SSR should all be plugged in. Here we go. So just to clean things up a little bit, these can actually clamp together just so they're a little bit out of the way and easier to wire manage. So we can kind of just tuck those under. There we go. One of the things that I didn't mention before is zip ties. They're going to be super helpful for this entire thing. So what we're going to do is just use this little mounting point right over here to do a little bit of a zip tie action, kind of hide everything over there, take the stresses away from the wires. There we go. Clip that just like that. Let's go ahead and tighten all this stuff up real quick. We can kind of tuck these wires away. There we go. That's at least just a little bit cleaner than them running all over the place. And we just have one more connection to make, and that's this little splitter that I showed you earlier. Like I said, you could have reused the stock wire here, but might as well make a nice little clean wire. And you have to make sure that you match the colors here. So our positive I'm going to put on the inside here next to the plus. Let's go ahead and make sure that's nice and tight. There we go. And negative goes on the inside here. Let's make sure it is nice and tight. There we go. And that should be it. I'm actually going to put one more zip tie here. Voila. Don't need it to be super tight. So there's room to cut and rearrange as needed. There we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to double check the wiring. I'm going to plug the printer in and make sure that everything is working, and we'll check it together. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, we got the machine powered on. So we're going to give this thing a minute to power on. I'm going to go over to the other side on the screen and turn the heater on. And what we're going to want to look for there is to see if this light turns on and the fan powers on, both on the heater and also here. And then we'll do another check with some temperatures. All right, the machine is on. Let's go ahead and go to the heater. And I'm going to set the heater temperature to 60 degrees. 60, let's go. So we should see that light turn on. We did. Did our fan turn on? Yep, our fan is flowing. Yep, I can clearly touch that. And I hear the heater on. That's on as well. So now I'm going to give this thing a few minutes. I'm also going to actually turn on the bed as well to, let's say, 60 degrees, just so that I can do a test and confirm that the temperature is correct there. So we got 60 on the heater, 60 on the bed. I'm going to give it about 10 minutes or so, and then we'll check some temperatures just to see how it's doing. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. I don't have a very reliable way to check temperature. I do have one of these thermometers that checks the surface level. And the way that I do this is I check what the temperature of the bed is reading currently. So it's currently at 50 degrees. And I kind of go through here and confirm it. So we got surface level about 47. So that's pretty close to what it's saying that it is. So I know, like I said, it's not the most accurate, but at least it checks the relative neighborhood of temperature. And it looks like the heatsink is cold to the touch. We got 21.5, 21.7. We got 21 on the side here, right where the SSR is. The SSR itself is completely cold. So yeah, very good so far. It hasn't been that long, but one thing to note is that if you have this thing updated, the latest firmware won't let the heater turn on until the bed is at full temperature. It's actually a more efficient way to run the heater, so that's not necessarily a bad thing. But the one main thing is they cut power to 0.4 of its original strength to preserve this. So what you can actually do is turn the power back up to about 0.7 for this in Klipper. It's very easy to do, and you should be able to heat a little bit faster, well, more than a little bit faster, almost double as fast as it does right now. So keep in mind, my panel is off here, so I am heating just the atmosphere in here. After about 10 or so minutes, we are at 35 and about 60 on the bed. So it's heating up. Like I said, if this thing was closed, that would heat up faster, and it's still at 0.4 of the actual power that it's supposed to have. The heat sink at this point is only at 22, and this should be its hottest point right over here. Yeah, I'm still seeing 21. I mean, there is an active fan literally blowing on it. So, I mean, to me, this is already a vast improvement. What we'll do is I'm going to go in KLIPPER. I'm going to shut this thing down. I'm going to go in KLIPPER. I'm going to change that one parameter to 0.7 instead of 0.4. And I'm going to do the same test in a second. All right, here's that setting. What I'm going to do is I'd like to copy and paste the second one underneath. So I'll copy this. I'll comment this one out. I'll make this 0.7. And do a save and restart. All right, now let's do the same test. We're gonna go to heated bed, 60, and chamber temperature, 60. So I'm gonna give it about 10 more minutes, and we'll do the same temperature check just to make sure we are all good. All right, so it has been about 10 minutes. Let's see what our readings are. Actually, I can see them in KLIPPER here. So we were at 36 minutes after 10 minutes previously. Now we're at 36 minutes. We were at 36 Celsius on the heater at the same exact, the same temperature in the same situation on the previous setting in the firmware. We are at 47.5 in the same time frame. So it definitely heats significantly faster with that setting increased. And the bed is at around 60 degrees, so let's go ahead and test it. I expect the surface to be a little bit cooler than that. I just saw 56.8, 56.9. I'm going to consider that about right. So the thermistor inside the bed is saying 60, and we're seeing about 57 on the surface where there's moving air. I'm going to consider that correct. So let's go ahead and check the heatsink here. So the heatsink is at 24.8 on the top. Let's see on the side. Right on the top where the actual SSR is sitting, 23.4. So if you guys saw the live stream previously, this part right over here, the actual SSR portion of this was getting to about 100. So my board was still getting pretty darn hot. Nothing else on the board was getting hot, but just this part right over here. And if we take a look at the stock one, that part is completely failed and is already melted and leaking down on the original part. Like I said, this was still working, and I was still using this in my office and home. So yeah, at the very least, you need to have this board in place. A lot of people are reporting that this one is safe. And they have been doing tests on this. So far I haven't seen anything negative about this, but like I said, if you are in the same camp as me, something like this is a lot more reputable and is a little bit more reliable. Obviously we're talking about this versus an entire heatsink fan proper SSR combination at about $35 of your cost and about an hour worth of your time. Let's do one more final test. It looks like we should be at 52 on the, or excuse me, 60 on the bed and 52 on the chamber. Let's see what we can see here. Yeah, so our bed surface is about the same as before, 56.3. It's supposed to be at 60. That's about right. And our heatsink is at, I'm seeing 26 on the side. And right where the SSR is mounted, I'm seeing 24. So that should be cool to the touch. Cool to the touch. Our thermal fuse is sitting right over here, so if things escalate, like I said, you want to get about 100 or even a 95 Celsius just to be safe on the SSR. Mine's at 125. If things go really wrong here, that thing's cutting off power, where if things are going wrong here, well, things are just gonna melt. So definitely a better setup. We got cleaner wiring. This is a success in my book. Let's see where we're at. Also, keep in mind, this thing would already be turning off if this was covered, because we're at 54 degrees on the on the chamber, and this is completely open. There's heat pouring out of here. So with this closed, that would heat significantly faster. All right, I'm calling this a success. Like I said, I'm not an electrician. I'm not a professional. I'm following a tutorial online. Take everything you see here with a grain of salt. Be sure you know what you're doing and you want to do this. You're in the same boat as me where you want to take it into your own hands, use better components, make sure this thing is safe, because this thing does knock out really, really great prints. And I'm going to be putting this machine up against the X1C and the K1, maybe even the K2, depending on what you guys are interested in, as all of these printers come out and unbox and all these things. But the price of this machine is very unique. It is very low for its size, for what it can do. Plus, additionally, Qidi Tech is going to be giving us the ability to do multicolor coming in the next few months here. So very excited for the machine. Like I said, this is just an absolute bummer. I'm sure if you saw the live stream, you just saw how deflated I was after finding this. And I'm still in the camp where you shouldn't have to do this to your $800 machine. But we're here, and I have this machine. I'd much rather be safe and in use than to be a complete paperweight, or to even return it and, you know, send a bunch of trucks going all over the place. You know, if you guys want to do that, and if you're uncomfortable with this, definitely take Qidi up on the either replacement or the full refund. All right, that's all for me. If you guys found this entertaining or useful, please throw me a like, or go ahead and send this video and share it. If you guys want some cool merch like this, or even my logo shirt behind me over here, go ahead and visit 3dprintsos.com. Some cool merch there, some cool swag, some 3D print related stuff, some projects that I make, things of that nature. Also in the description, where you'll find everything that you need, there's also a free Discord where like-minded people are chatting. That's where I met the person that designed this file, and through our live streams, obviously, and also a link to our Patreon if you'd like to support that way. All right, that's all from me for today. As always, I'll see y'all in the comments. Later.